Bye. We begin on 55A. Good morning. 55A at the mission at the very top. Continuing with the discussions about what exactly certain terms mean in the context of a neder. Nedarim min dagan. If someone vows to abstain from dagan, which would translate as grain, asur b'pol hamisri yavesh. He can also not eat or not benefit from dried Egyptian beans. Okay. Classically, we don't think of those as one of the five grains, but Rabbi Meir, this is what Rabbi Meir says, and the Gemara will examine in a little more detail why that is. But the rabbis say, no, grain means grain. The five types of grain, which are, if I remember correctly, wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and
rye.
Rye, thank you.
That's according to Rashi.
Yes, right. I know oats is very controversial.
But interesting, they are not including rice.
Not including rice, correct. And actually, the Gemara will discuss rice.
I didn't read ahead.
Briefly. Okay. Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Meir says, if one uses the term tevua, which I usually translate as produce, then that refers to only the five types of grain. But if you use the word dagan, which we also translate as grain, but really it comes from a word that means things that are piled up. So as we'll see in the Gemara, the five grains tend to be piled up as they're harvested, as opposed to other things like rice, as according to some. So if you make your neder about dagan, that doesn't just mean grain; it means anything that's piled up in a granary. But that does not include fruit of the tree or vegetables, which tend not to be stored in piles. Exactly how they're stored, I don't know. Maybe they're stored in bins. Typically, that's how I see it. How I see them shipped anyway in bins. So, but not stored in silos and piles. So Gemara asked, the dagan called the midgan mashma. So it seems like Rabbi Meir is interpreting the word dagan as something that's piled up, and that's why he includes Egyptian beans, dried Egyptian beans. Masi Rabbi Yosef, but Rabbi Yosef asked, v'chifrotz hadavar hirbu b'nei Yisrael reishis dagan tirosh v'tzar v'chol tuas sadel arav. So this is referring to a verse in Divrei Hayamim where the authorities noticed that people were not giving their truma and maser and their tithes and everything, and so they kind of instructed them to do that. And as the word spread, so they gave plenty of the first fruits of grain, wine, and oil. V'yamra dagan kom d'midan mashma my kifrotza davar hirbu. If you think that dagan, which is referred to in here, means everything that's piled up, then what is the Gemara isn't clear on what the question is, but it seems like the question comes from the end of the verse, which is v'chol tuas hasadel arov. So if dagan means things that are piled up, then what is included by all the produce of the field, by kol tuas hasadeh? So if dagan means everything that's piled up, then what is kol tuas hasadeh referring to? So our answers are by let's see parasayil and biyar. It means things like fruit and vegetables. Those are not piled up, and they were contributed as tithes by the people as well. And then the Mishnah continues, or Meir Omer Nedarim min Nedarim. Meir says, yeah. Rabbi Yochanan says, everyone agrees that when you take a neder not to partake of tevua, of produce, that only includes the five types of grain. Everybody agrees that. Here's a price of that accords with that. Shavin benoder minatzvua, that Rav Meir and the Chachamim agree about someone who makes a neder from tevua. Shenosar ela mechamesh esamim. So the Brisa states that specifically. So pshita. So Mar says, well, obviously, I mean, that's what the rabbis said in our Mishnah, right? They said specifically, so what's his other Brisa coming to tell us? I would have thought that tevua, so that's what the rabbis say about daga, but I might have thought that tevua means everything, including fruits and vegetables. That it's not the case. So Rav Yosef asked, what about that verse that we just saw? So the verse refers to tuas hasada, but not to tevua. Okay, tevua can mean tevua can mean only grain, and tuas hasada can mean every type of produce. All right, fine. Bar Shmuel Pakid, the son of Mar Shmuel, commanded, presumably in a will, delete nun tleisar alfei zuzul Rava. He wanted to bequest 13,000 zuz to Rava, min alalta dinahar panya, from the alalta of the river Panya. Okay, what is alalta? That's what this discussion is going to center around. It seems like the good translation for alalta is like wealth. Okay. So he's saying from the wealth of the river Panya, meaning presumably the wealth that I have from the river Panya, from that part of my estate, I bequeathed 13,000 zuz to Rava. Shalcha Rava lekame de Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef asked, Rava asked about this. He asked Rav Yosef the following question: Alalta heichimikaria. What does this mean? Alalta, like what's he talking about? What? Where do I get this 13,000 zuz from? Alal, Rav Yosef, Masni say. Rav Yosef says, don't you know your Mishnah? It's in the Mishnah. V'shavin benoder minatzvua she'ena aser ela mechamesh aminin. So he's translating alalta as tevua. How he guessed that this is alalta, I don't know, but that's what he's clearly saying, is that the Mishnah that refers to tevua, that refers to the 5 types of grain, that is what he meant when he said alalta, and that's where you should take your 13,000 zuz from his grain holdings. Amarle Abaye, so Abaye answered, Bidame, what can you? Is that the same? Like tevua lo mashma lo hamishes aminim. The word tevua, as we saw clearly in our Mishnah, it's the word tevua that they're taking to mean the 5 types of grain. Alalta komi le mashma. If alalta means wealth, like where do you get this from? That alalta means tevua. That's not stated in the Mishnah. We're talking about the common usage of this word alalta, which, as I said, apparently means like general, is a more general term. So why are you applying alalta to the words of the Mishnah, which is not in there? Adruhu lakame de Rava. So Rava had sent this question. He got the answer from Rav Yosef, and now he heard about Abaye's objection. Amar, he said, "Holo kabam vayli." That wasn't what I was asking. I understand that alalta means wealth. It means it's a general term. It means everything. I know the baile. This was my question. Schar batim schar sfinos mai. What about collecting rent, like collecting my share from rent that he gets for renting out houses and renting out boats, ships? Is that mi amrinan kevan the paschan the pachasan level altahi? What's the question here? These things, houses and ships, they depreciate over time. So is that considered wealth or not? Since like every day their value is declining, maybe that's not included in the term alalta, and so I would not be permitted to take my share from these proceeds of renting out things that depreciate. Odilma, or maybe kevan delo yedia pachasaihu, since you can't tell, like from one day to the next, you wouldn't say the house is worth less today or the ship is worth less today than it was yesterday. No, it's a long-term thing, right? So since you can't really put your finger on exactly where and how much and so on, it's depreciating, but it's a long-term thing. So it's still considered wealth. And we're about Yosef. So now these things are being reported back and forth. So Rava's kind of rephrasing of his question was told to Rabbi Yosef. Amar, and he said, what if he didn't want to know the answer to the word to what alalta means? We already knew that, but he was asking a different question. What is he sending us a stupid question for? If he means a different question, right? He sent the question, what is alalta? And I told him what alalta is, and then he says, that's not what I was asking. I was asking specifically about the rental of ships and houses. So Ikpag Rav Yossi was angry about this. Shama Rava heard that Rav Yossi was angry. So he went to him on the Erev Yom Kippur to apologize. And he came into the room and he saw that Rav Yosef's attendant was mixing wine, was pouring wine for him. And by the way, Rav Yosef was blind. Okay, so presumably he did not see, certainly he didn't see, but he didn't detect that Rava came into the room. So Rava says to the Shabbos, Havli de'em zagle ana, let me pour the wine for him. Yavle, and so it was. So he gave the attendant gives the cup to Rava, and he pours the wine for Rabbi Yosef and gives it to him. But Rabbi Yosef is still unaware of the switch. Ki kashasi, when he drank it, Amar, he said, Hadain mizga dami lemizga the Rava Rabbi Yosef bar Chava. This is good wine. This was well poured. Pouring here means mixing, right? As you probably recall, wine was very strong and was maybe fortified or whatever. It was very strong, and before you drank it, you mixed it with water. So so he's like, this is perfectly mixed wine. This is like Rava's mixing. Rava was my favorite mixer. Amalei, who knew? So Rava says, yeah, right, you are. Rava, it's me, Rava. I mixed your drink. Amalei, so he said, don't sit down until you've answered this question for me. My dichsiv, so basically he's digressing here he's asking a question that's been bothering him. So, I think the idea is that he forgave him in the end, right? That Rava came to apologize on Erev Yom Kippur, and he found out that he was still held in high esteem by Rav Yosef, because Rav Yosef asked him the following question: what is the meaning of this pasuk? So this is a verse in a poetic section of Sefer Bamidbar. After the Torah describes the incident of a well that they found water, and there was a shira, a song that composed there, and then abruptly in the middle of a verse, the Torah continues with this cryptic sequence of places, which on the face of it means these are places where they next travel to. They went from Midbar to Matana, from Matana to Nachliel, from Nachliel to Bamos, and from Bamos to Hagai Asher Al Pnei HaYishimon, the valley by Yishimon. Now the problem is that in the other lists of places that the people traveled in the desert, none of these places appears. So presumably the idea is that this is some kind of a metaphor, and that's how the Gemara how Rava will now interpret. Amar, so he said, Rava said to him, how do you interpret these things? When a person makes himself like a desert, so presumably like he opens himself up to everyone. It's a desert doesn't belong to anybody. It's hefker, right? So when you negate yourself to the extent that you open yourself up to others, possibly with property, with charity, whatever, it could mean anything else. It could mean like you're open to anyone to teach Torah or whatever. Torah nitna lo b'matana. The Torah is given to him as a gift. Shenemar mimidbar matana. That's the meaning of the first phrase, from midbar to matana, from the desert to gift. Once it's given to him as a gift, nichalo el. The next place is nachli el. So we're interpreting that as God makes it his inheritance. The next step is Keva Shenichalo El. The next thing is Minachli El Bamos. Olo Ligdula. A Bama is a platform, right? So from this inheriting this Torah, you go to a platform. You get raised up. You get rise to greatness. And then the next thing is Mi Bamos. From Bamos, you go to Haggai, this valley. So what's with the valley? If you're too proud, right? If you're too haughty from being raised by God, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashpilo, God can bring you down a notch to the valley, as it were. And the final phrase of the statement is V'nishkaf al pnei ha'yeshimon, which means overlooking the yeshimon, the wilderness, meaning that we're interpreting the words V'nishkafa as shokin, sunk into the ground, right? Not only do you get lowered by God, but you're really lowered to a point where you're really sunk. But the good news is, and this is not from this verse, but we're bringing another proof text about this that refers to a guy, to a valley. If you do tshuva from your haughtiness and the Kadosh Baruch Hu you get raised again by God. Shnemar kol gei nasei. Every valley will be raised. It's a pasuk in Yeshayahu. So just not to end on a on a downer, as it were, in that pasuk. Tanya, we have another brisa. Hanodar min dagan. A person who makes a neder from to not benefit from dagan, from grain or things that are piled up. You can't. This is Rabbi Meir's view in the Mishnah. You also can't benefit from dried Egyptian beans. But we're only talking about dry beans. But fresh beans is okay because they don't get piled up. They're only piled up as dagan once they are dried. And Charlie asked about rice. You're permitted to eat rice because apparently rice is not piled up. And bechilcha, betargis, and with all these other things, which according to the translation here, there are different types of grits that come from wheat. These are also not piled up, and you're permitted to partake of them if you made another against dagan. Okay. Now we're going to move on to some other terms of neder. Hanodim in peros hashana, a person who makes a neder against.
Can I jump in a question before you go on?
Please.
Yeah, so maybe back then rice was not piled up, but today rice is definitely piled into silos.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I don't know how they, what the method was for storing rice. But all of these things can change with, as the Gemara says, everything goes by, the common usage of language. So anything that we encounter in the Gemara, which applies to the time and the use of language in the time of the Gemara, it's unclear. But I always assume that if something has a different meaning, then we go by today's meaning if you're making a neder today. So as Charlie says, if rice is actually piled up, then possibly it would be included in the term dagan. On the other hand, dagan in modern Hebrew, I think really just refers to grain. I don't think it refers to things that are piled up. I don't really know. So,
right.
all these things are very...
Rice is definitely a grain, as is corn, which was unknown to Chazal.
Exactly, that's true as well. So it's completely unclear if and how any of this can be applied to modern, use of language. I really wouldn't know what to say about it. It seems to me that this whole, much of Nedarim, as I've said before, is taken up with specific uses of terms and which are not familiar to us. Or might be different than our familiar usage. So it's really unclear if and how this can all be applied. That being said, let's continue. Another miparas hashana. What if a person makes a neder against fruits of the year? Also b'chol peros hashana. So you can't have any fruits that are as we'll see what the difference is. Fruits of the year means fruits that grow year round. Mutar b'gedoyim v'tlayim v'chalav v'beitzim v'gozlos. And you are permitted. These things are not things that grow, right, or that grow in the ground anyway. Goats, lambs, milk, eggs, chickens, right? None of these things are considered fruit. V'mamar gidulei shana alai, but if he says these things, the things that grow during the year are prohibited to me, then also b'kulan. Then even things that don't grow in the ground, like animals, are forbidden to him, because that implies things that grew during the year, not growth. Which growing things seems to refer to things that grow in the ground. Things that grow can refer to animals as well. Another brisa says that if you take a neder against fruits of the ground, of the earth, so that's things that are rooted in the ground that applies to, but does not apply to mushrooms and truffles. V'imamar gidul, as we know, those things, and the Gemara will right now examine this a little more closely, but those aren't rooted in the ground; they're fungi, and they get their nourishment not necessarily directly from the earth. V'imamar gidulei karka alai, but if he says things that grow in the ground are on the ground are prohibited, then also b'kulan. Now that includes mushrooms and truffles, because they can grow, they do grow on the ground, they just don't grow in the ground, as it were. So we're asking from a whole different area, but there seems to be an application here. What bracha do you make on something that does not grow from the ground? So on fruits and vegetables, you make the bracha borei pri ha'etz or borei pri adama. Anything else that doesn't grow from the ground, like meat or water or things like that, you say shakol niyabid baro. That's the bracha for those things. V'tanya, and we have another brisa. This includes salt and salt water and truffles and mushrooms. So clearly this implies that they do not grow from the ground, because the bracha you make on them is shakol. So how come in the case of Nedarim we say that they are considered things that grow from the ground? And if you phrase it as gidulei karka, so by answers, mirva ravu me'ara, they do grow from the ground. Meinak me'avir yankev v'lo me'ara, but they grow like on the ground, but their nourishment comes from the air, not from the ground. Okay, so they are things that grow on the ground, even though when it comes to a bracha, you would not consider them things that grow from in the ground, because that's not where their nourishment comes from. But what about the first part of our brisa, which says things that whose growth is not from the ground? So Tane al davar she'ein yonek min haaretz. So we're going to reread that. Not something that doesn't grow from the ground, it's something that is nourished from the ground. Okay.
So that brings the question of what bracha do you say on hydroponic vegetables that are grown in water that never see the ground?
Great question. Do you know? Is there?
I actually don't know. I've always said ha'adamah, but
you don't always know, right?
I'm not sure
where
that's
something grew
yeah.
from. Right?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I've never thought of that. But yeah, this would imply that those things they should be shahakol, you would think. I wonder. That's a
Yeah.
great question. I'd
Another
be
interesting,
interested. I'd be
another
interested to
interesting
know
thing
if you
with rice.
if you find out an answer to that. I'd be interested to know.
Okay, I'll look it up today. Another interesting thing is rice, which can grow directly in the ground, but is not
Often grown, yeah, often grown on or rice paddies are typically flooded.
right, flooded rice paddies.
Right, but aren't they still growing from the ground?
I think they do grow from the ground eventually.
Uh-huh.
But although interestingly, although it's not discussed here, but in the Yerushalmi Brachot, they're very clear that the bracha on rice should be Brei Pri Ha'adamah,
Uh-huh.
which is not the way the Bavli Paskins and not the way the halakhic codes have it.
Right. Yeah, this is interesting. Maybe because maybe it may have something to do with, as you said before, rice is a grain, but it's not considered one of the 5 classic grains in halacha.
Yeah, they seem to struggle with rice.
And was
Back
rice
in, I'm sorry.
was rice grown in the Middle East in ancient times?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Although I don't know how common it was. They've even found yeah, it's I think there are even species of rice that are native there. I'll look that up again. But rice used to be grown on dry fields.
Mhm.
But I asked the Torah Flora person, John Greenberg, and he said he's unaware of any commercial rice today that is not grown in flooded fields.
Hmm.
And he probably know more than anybody in the from world.
Hmm. Although there's a lot of new varieties of rice being generated now, right? There's like that golden rice became
That golden rice
thing.
may be miraculous. It's amazing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it has made a huge difference in nutrition.
Well, then there's an issue. Then there's an issue of what is not just for rice, but what is wheat. There are at least 5 species of wheat,
Mhm.
only 2 of which are really grown in significant commercial quantities.
Uh-huh.
And can I make motzi, for instance, on hamotzi, for instance, on einkorn wheat, which is not grown. It's grown a little bit commercially. You can buy it on the internet or health food store. It doesn't have the same properties as normal wheat. It doesn't rise very well. I've tried to bake with it. It's not easy.
Yeah. In general, a lot of the Gemara is concerned with categorizing things, right?
Yes.
But there are so many things which don't really fit a category, right? They cross over boundaries.
Right.
And it's always been very interesting to me that with a lot of the modern discussion about gender, right? The Gemara recognized very early, quite clearly, that we do not live in a binary gender world, right? Although most people may be considered, male or female, but the Gemara is quite, explicit and always discusses these exceptions to the general rule. I guess they considered it, but that there are people who are not male or female. That's quite clear.
It's not the same as what we have today, but they clearly see that there are people who are not obviously
outside the categories. Yeah, not easily categorized.
And they struggle with what to do about them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So this is nothing new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the people who assume that this is kind of outside the bounds of the Jewish experience or Jewish thought are clearly mistaken.
Yeah, they haven't learned it. They haven't learned enough Gemara.
Yeah. All right. Next Mishnah. Another Mexus. Person says he makes a neder against clothing. Mutar b'saku v'yiriya v'chamila. So that's fine with shirts and pants, but sackcloth and curtains or sheets and chamila, which we'll see what that is in the Gemara, but it seems like a kind of a coarse kind of cloth. That's not considered clothing. That's like you cover yourself from the rain or whatever. It's more like this, what comes to mind is a sleeping bag. Sleeping bag is not clothing; it's bedding. And so if you put a sleeping bag around your shoulders to keep warm, that is not considered clothing. Amar konem semer olala. What if a person makes a neder against wool coming on me? Mutar lis kasos begizet semer. So you can cover yourself with wool shearing. So this is like unprocessed wool, I think. So it's not really wearing it. It's not really wearing woolen clothing, which is what we assume that he meant. Similarly, a person says, another against flax coming on me. You can cover yourself with stacks of unprocessed flax. Stalks of unprocessed flax. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hakol Lefi Anoder. Rabbi Yehuda says it depends on this context. For example, what if you're carrying a load of wool, okay, and it's heavy, and you're sweating a lot, and you smell, right? Amar, and he says, he's like, I'm taking another against wool. I'm carrying all this wool. It's making me uncomfortable. It's a nasty job. Swearing off wool forever, or for whatever, for 3 days. Which are at least custos. So then you could actually cover yourself and clothe yourself with wool. What you can't do is carry wool, right? So from the context of the neder, it's clear that you were upset about carrying these heavy bags of wool, heavy loads of wool, and that's what your neder was against, not against wearing, a nice merino wool shirt. Okay, Tanya. We have a brisa. Another minaxus, if you make a neder against clothing, mutar b'sak v'bir v'chamila, like the Mishnah said, v'asur b'punda u'b'piskia, but you are not permitted. Included in the neder is a hollowed out belt and a wide belt, u'b'kurtia, u'b'katavlia, a leather shirt. Katavlia, I don't know what that is. Translated here as maybe like some kind of a stiff leather. V'anpilia, u'plinia, leather slippers, or leather, heavier leather shoes, umichnasayim v'kova, and pants, and a hat. These things are all considered clothing, and they would be included in the neder against clothing. My iskurte. What is this iskurte we referred to before in this statement? A leather shirt. Okay, Tanya. Yotzin b'sak avo b'sagos ava. When it comes to Shabbos, so you can't carry things in the public domain, but of course you can wear clothing. So how do you determine? So the Gemara is concerned, this price is concerned with what is considered clothing and what is considered something that's not clothing, but that you're therefore carrying it. So you can you can go out on Shabbos with thick sackcloth and thick sagos, which is what even thicker, like a very stiff cloth. Uviria b'chamila. These are what our Mishnah referred to a heavy cloth. Because these things are worn as rain gear. So it's considered clothing. So it doesn't matter if it's raining or not, or if you use it as a raincoat, you can wear it. It's like considered clothing, and you can have it with you when you're walking around on Shabbos. But you can't use a kind of a box or a basket as rain gear, like as a hat or whatever, to keep the rain off you. Because that is clearly not clothing, and that's considered something that you're carrying. Excuse me. Shepherds can go out with sackcloth, and doesn't only apply to shepherds. Like once something is clothing, then it's clothing. It's clothing for shepherds. It's clothing for me as well. That means anybody can do it. When the Mishnah says that shepherds can wear these things that they commonly wear for reindeer, since it was shepherds who usually did it, the Mishnah refers to shepherds, but really anybody could wear these things on Shabbos and not be considered carrying. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, the Mishnah we said, Rabbi Yehuda says everything depends on the context. Tanya, we have brisa. Ketzat, this brisa spells it out. Ketzat Amar Rabbi Yehuda Kol Lefi. What does he mean when he says that? If you were wearing, a wool coat and you were sweating, it was a hot day and you were uncomfortable. And then you make a neder against semer, against wool coming on me. Also, then the neder applies to wearing wool, but it doesn't apply to carrying wool, carrying loads of wool, because the context is you were wearing a heavy coat and it was uncomfortable, and that was your neder. That was the source of your neder, the motivation for your neder. But if you were carrying a load of flax and you were sweating and uncomfortable, and you said, I'm never putting flax on me, then then the context is that the neder clearly refers to carrying the flax and not wearing the flax. So you would be permitted to wear the flax. And we will pick up here tomorrow morning.
So the last one, if I say flax is konam, there's the issue that flax is also eaten, and I actually use flaxseed meal in baking.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, again, so I guess it would depend on the context.
Most people don't.
No. So here's the here the language of the nether is ola alai, right? Flax is not going to come on me, right? Whereas eating comes in you. So I guess it wouldn't be included by the language of the nether in addition to the context.
But can I carry it home from garden?
Okay.
Now, back in the previous paragraph, the thing about carrying some kind of a rain protection that's not a garment.
Yeah.
I have seen in places where they don't think that they should use the eruv, men covering their hats with plastic.
Yes, right. So would that be allowed on Shabbos?
On Shabbos, yeah, and it would seem that that would be a problem based on this sugya.
Indeed.
My answer is go ahead and use the eruv, but
yeah. All right.
Yasher Koach. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Hanukkah Smack.